Well, I'm not seeing a whole lot of movement, so we're going to go ahead and get started. This is our third and final session for the day. It is titled Buzzword Bashing. I'm your moderator for this afternoon. I'm Jim Millard, and I've been in the community for quite some time and have noticed more than once that we have jargon. That's part of our IT community. And a lot of that jargon is invented, borrowed, misused, grabbed from other industries, and we're a bunch of very picky people, it seems. So, aside from the fact that, well, some of us are grammar Nazis, like it when you spell your correctly, but we also have folks that are very persnickety about, is it premise or premises? Is it HCI if you're not doing server-based storage? Is it cloud if it's just your gear sitting in somebody's data center? So the idea behind the buzzword bashing isn't specifically to bash a given buzzword like cloud, which we have been hearing for what, 8-9 years now? And it means something different to everybody. It's more of how language is used in both the training, technical communication, as well as the marketing, marketecture, the lies that we tell ourselves and our customers to get them to buy our stuff. And so I've got panelists here that I'm going to let them introduce themselves, have been working in our industry for a while and have had to deal with language and buzzwords, jargon, and I believe they all have opinions on the use of language. So I'm going to hand it off. Gabriel?
My name is Gabe Chapman. I'm the Senior Manager for NetApp's HCI go-to-market platform.
Not HCI.
Sure.
HCI-like.
We'll let the customer decide.
I'm Edward Haletky. I'm an analyst for TVP Strategy. I've been working with this particular space since 2004, and in technology since, oh good Lord, 50 some odd, about 30 some odd years.
Hi, I'm Stu Miniman. I'm an analyst with Wikibon, host of theCUBE, and it's been 2 months since I've last corrected somebody in public for their grammar.
Well, give it about 30 seconds. My name is Jay Metz. I'm a R&D engineer for Cisco, and I'm just antisocial, so I'm not really, I just like making fun of people for doing stupid things. I'm, snarky. So what are we going to start with?
Like Fiber Channel.
Well, Fiber Channel actually has a definition, unlike HCI for NetApp, apparently.
So let's kind of start this out by focusing not on specific buzzwords, but the creation and promulgation of buzzwords in the industry, and the people that are very, very anal about the proper use of the buzzwords that they themselves may have coined. Stu, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start because John Troyer actually said that I came up with a terrifically awful term a few years ago called server sand. And as an analyst, I'm actually going to defend the use of buzzwords because people need something to glom onto. When something new is happening, they need to be able to kind of understand those trends. I mean, virtualization has been around since the mainframe era, but server virtualization with VMware, big wave, we've all ridden it. Cloud, been more than a decade now. It's a little bit fuzzy as to what it was. My favorite early term was it was just legless sheep, is pretty much what clouds were. But now we understand there's an operating model around it. There are many, many definitions out there, but it is useful to have these terms, and then we can debate things like architecture, we can debate things like what is or isn't part of this wave. I've spent a lot of time, you fight the, whatever it's cloud washing or, container washing, everything else, we create up forecasts, and one of my favorite things is usually if something becomes popular, you're going to underrepresent the forecast because everybody's going to say, ooh, this thing I've been doing for the last 7 years actually is that. All these software-defined storage companies that really were companies that had software in their storage doesn't mean that they're necessarily that new wave. So it's useful to have these conversations. Customers are really busy, so they a lot of times will have these things, coming from management, and they'll want to research it. vBrownBag does a good job educating people on this. So I for one like some of these. I got lots of wounds through the cloud wars of 8-9 years ago. So I don't like to argue as much about the definitions, like HCI, but the terms are good, the waves are good, and I'll stop there and let somebody else comment.
So I take a slightly different approach to the whole buzzword thing, and you and I've had kind of humorous back and forth about the server sand thing. My issue with it is that words are supposed to help clarify certain things. Literally is a good example of that, as opposed to the figurative stuff.
Look in the dictionary. Literally is no longer literally.
I know.
It's figuratively.
Thank you, Oxford. Anyway. Yeah, thanks
you
for
literally have no idea what you're talking about.
Apparently not. Write it down. It's all literal. Anyway, so the thing is, software-defined storage is a really good example. I'm glad that you brought it up, because the problem winds up being that if you establish a buzzword that really has no meaning, then effectively what you're doing is you're obfuscating the truth. You're not clarifying the truth. And so the problem I'm having right now in the technology that I work in, which is really low-level storage, is that companies are coming out and saying that they have a technology which they don't have. And they're using the words because they're vague enough to assimilate into this group of products and solutions and software when they don't actually have it. And that to me is dissembling. That to me is lying. That to me is telling people that you are doing something that you're not doing. Software-defined storage often is software-implemented storage. And sometimes it's just software-managed storage, which means it's management software. And so the thing is that the problem I have with buzzwords is that you now have to spend extra effort to try to clarify to people who, quite frankly, are innocent in all of this, the customers in particular.
I spend more time working through what specific definition is with a customer around something when they're really looking for a specific outcome, right?
Yep.
And so at the end of the day, it's like, whether you call it X, Y, or Z, if it meets the criteria of what the customer needs to do, then it is that. And so we work in a world where politics and marketing are kind of the same thing, where we're politically pushing forward an agenda based on the marketing of what a specific goal is for an outcome. And unfortunately, the bigger challenge there is that, I will get to come out as a product and say it meets the definition of this, that, or the other thing based on the caveats or challenges that the marketing team have come forward with in the beginning. But those of us who work in the true technology realm, we're very adjusted to, or very accommodated to, specific definitions and words having specific meanings. And so when we hear that stuff, immediately we recoil. We're like, oh my God, you're just full of it. Like, don't even bother with me. But then there are other people in the purchasing cycle and other people in the provisioning cycle that will totally glom onto that stuff. And so that's the bigger challenge, is that not everybody wants to play on the same level playing field. We all kind of have our own series of areas that we want to go after to make sure that we're making or meeting our deadlines or our provisioning, right?
Well, therein lies the internal problem, right? So if you've got people who don't really spend a lot of time in the technology, and they hear the buzzwords and they say, oh, we need to have this solution, and this solution could be hyperconvergence, or it could be software-defined storage, or it could be something along those lines, software-defined networking, and they don't actually know what it's supposed to mean. They'll take limited resources that have alternative uses and need to be put into promises that have already been met in order to create this fabricated environment. For example, at Cisco, for example, I can speak from Cisco's perspective. It's not uncommon to have people say, oh, this is the latest and greatest thing. We need to now put energy into this. And I know it's not indigenous to Cisco. Every company has this problem. That is like, oh, this is what people are talking about. We must have this, otherwise we're leaving money on the table. I'm like, you don't even know what this is. And yet you want to try to take things away from stuff that is selling, stuff that people actually want, people that you want to fix, right? And I'm speaking generically, and I know it's not just a Cisco thing, but this all comes from the idea that we can then sell an idea that has nothing underneath it. It's vaporware. I keep getting these impressions of people. In my head, I have, when we start talking about on-premises or on-premise, or God help us on-prem,
On site?
Say on site. Please say on site.
Yes.
But the thing is that every time I think about someone going on-prem, I keep going on-prem. Let's double click on on-prem. It's like this. It's this weird, used car salesman, kind of a slick back, greasy hair, chains with open vests, kind of thing. It's like, hey, what's your sign? Mine's on-prem. Come on over. I just hate it.
Yeah. Let me tell you about this cloud thing we've been hearing so much about, right?
Don't use the C word with me, pal.
The cloud.
So,
oh, sure, point it at my
Across the streams.
the microphones are too close together. Yes.
Just wanted to point out that's when he pointed at his crotch, he got feedback. I'm not really sure what that means.
It's foil.
So we actually use buzzwords. I mean, humans classify everything. We do it naturally. When we use a term, my mom's used to using a term that makes no sense to me, but it made sense to her in the 1970s. So I have no clue what she was talking about half the time because she's using terminology she pulled out of a grab bag that, she forgot most of it. But that's what we do. We classify things all the time. We use terms to do that. Humans just naturally do that. We call water, water, river, river. Some people call that, what was flowing behind my house a creek, but now it's a river. Because I'm in Austin, Texas, and we have like 15 inches of rain. But we all use words to classify. But what I really don't like vendors doing as an analyst is using these buzzwords to try to classify things that they actually just don't do. I mean, I had one company say, we do virtualization, we do containers, and we do cloud. It's like, which one? And what do you mean? Because when I looked at his product, it didn't do any of that. It wasn't even talking about that. It was a security tool for a very specific use case, and they were telling people they were doing everything else besides that use case. And that is not good. It's not healthy for the company to do, because they're just going to be attacked by everybody. And it doesn't help anybody. They're just saying, they're saying, can't leave money on the table. Well, if you don't tell us what you do, and you use a buzzword instead, you don't meet my use case, I buy your stuff, I'm going to complain.
So one of the things that I do for my job is I go out and I evaluate technology for a bunch of startups, many of which are in stealth. Yeah. Right? So you have to go through this process of NDAs and that kind of stuff, and it's all well codified. However, I once spent a 2-hour conversation with a company that would not tell me what they did. The only thing that they would tell me is that they had a disruptive technology in software-defined storage using this new thing called NVMe. I'm like, yes, but what do you do? Well, we have a disruptive technology using software-defined storage. I'm going to give you one more chance, and then I'm walking out the door. 2 hours of nothing but fog. No, it was a startup. It was not anybody on this list. These are all good people. This was somebody completely different. Not here.
Well, but that happens a lot. And I go into meetings and I get briefings, and then 30 minutes later, I still don't know what the company does. But yeah, they do software-defined something. But we don't know what that something is. I mean, that's the problem.
I want some people to define. Yeah. When you say define, what do you mean? Define the word define.
What do you mean by is?
It all depends on what is.
I almost wish that they use if the companies are going to start selling something, they use the 1,000 most common words in the world. Kind of like the guy did XKCD. He wrote the thing explainer in the 1,000 most common words. It's almost like people should go back to that. Use common words that I understand. Don't make up something that I don't understand. That would be really cool.
Hey, I worked in academia for many years, and trust me, nobody can add in extra words where they're not necessary, like an academic.
That's true. But it's not like there's an ISO definition for public cloud or HCI or software-defined storage. The challenge is that, and I sympathize with the small startups because they only get that 30-minute or 1-hour discussion with you. They have to do something that's going to hook you, right? And if they come up with a vanilla story, then obviously you know that there's nothing really real there. But if they can pivot it to something that is really truly disruptive or truly understandable for you, then you get to go forward and move with it. But the reality is we have to placate or play to a lot of these base definitions that sound right, but the devil's always in the details. And until you actually spend the time to dig down into what they're truly doing, the security company that's pitching themselves as a cloud product may actually have a very legitimate reason why they believe that they should be in that particular dynamic. But until they actually sit down and explain it to you, they're never going to do it. And the reality is we don't always have an hour to sit down and kind of walk you through it. So we have to go play kind of towards the lowest common denominator or the most simplistic. So when I say cloud or I say software defined or if I say these things, that's how I get my foot in the door, and then I can actually start to move forward.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, because the problem is, as we know in IT, it's never simple. Remember public cloud was supposed to be real easy, you swipe a credit card, it's real easy?
Yeah.
Amazon released like 3 features while we've been on this panel.
Yes.
So, they've got over 1,000 main features out there. Everything is very nuanced in our world. Everything is really complicated. That's why, a lot of people here help build this in the virtualization space. That's the thing that we get excited about, is playing with these new things. So unfortunately, right, it's never simple. And the problem I think a lot of us has when you boil it down to, a single word or things like that, you're a lot of times missing that what do you really do? I think that's what we like. I mean, most of us here on the panel, we'd rather not have a half hour, but give us a day where we can go in there, tease it apart, understand the architecture, see where everything goes. I mean, I remember, 15 years ago, I started working with VMware, and like when everybody first learned vMotion, I had the honor of having Ed, who is one of the founders, CTO of VMware, like explain down at the kernel zero level, like how vMotion actually worked, and it like blew everyone's mind. So that's what we as technologists and geeks like to do, and buzzwords sometimes pull away from it, but they can still be helpful.
Well, the thing is that as an analyst, I'm looking for something in my space, something I'm interested in, something.
MySpace is dead, man.
Yeah, it is. And that's why the buzzwords are actually there, to grab my attention, grab your attention. But I don't mind if you use a buzzword as long as you back it up with something that actually is useful, that actually meets that. If you say, oh, I'm going to do software-defined storage and it's software-implemented storage, well, know the difference. It's a big deal to me. I mean, I have my definition of SDS. Everybody does. There is no standard definition for it. There's kind of some assumptions around it.
Well, there is. I mean, the SNIA dictionary does have software-defined storage, and it's a relatively decent one. But that's the exact point. And so, if there is a standard definition for a term, even if it's imperfect, at least adhere to it.
Yes.
Right. And so the thing is that to your point and to what Gabe was just saying, I have no problem if a startup wants to punch above its weight. Right. If they want to use a buzzword to open the door, but I'm not going to hang out in the doorway. Don't keep using the same buzzword to keep me going in the door. I'm like, all right, I'm in the door. Tell me something. Don't make me go back out and come back in again, because I'm just going to not come back in.
So you're saying we shouldn't have the hardware-based, software-defined network?
Why not?
Ouch. It really comes down to is that gets you. I mean, it's right. You get you in the door, but you really have to have some meat behind it. And you guys also, as technologists, know. Everything's under change, anyways. Tomorrow they're going to have a new marketing term that's going to pop up, and it's not going to have any meaning behind it until someone puts it there. This is the whole thing about technology today. But what really kind of bothers me is people trying to take normal English words that have a very distinct meaning and saying that there's something else. That really bothers me.
Ultimately, that's marketing, and I think that's something that we've always had to fight and deal with. I think one of the bigger issues sometimes that we have is that a lot of times we're talking to the C-level, we're talking to the CIO, we're talking to the CTO. This is a person who may run a large organization. A number of people have multiple departments that report up to him. And if I'm couching terms to him, I need to make them resonate enough to where all of the stuff that he's read in all the trade mags, because he's not going to sit down and want to talk about the kernel level unless he's like, that totally geeks him, right? The reality is I have to minimize the amount of complexity of the story that I'm telling, and if I don't do that, I'm going to lose people. I'm going to have them glaze over. So there's this kind of like weird dichotomy between, there are certain people I have to have the discussion with where I have to go very, very deep into the weeds about what I'm doing from a technical standpoint, almost at the code level, but then there's a whole other group of people that I have to talk to in very simplistic kindergarten terms where I explain it to the way I explain it to my grandmother, because they just don't have enough time to actually sit down and do all those things. So everything kind of sits between those two parallels, and I think that's what keeps us in this particular situation where we're having definitions that have one very distinct thing, but it can also span into other areas, right?
So basically, what we're really talking about here is that there needs to be a middle ground between the arbitrary press release and the technical kernel level conversation. So unfortunately, in all tech companies, communication is not a very highly prioritized thing until things go wrong, and then it's too late. So realistically, there needs to be more people going to Toastmasters, for crying out loud. You know, people who actually have experience, you know, with the clarification and simplification of an idea. And I don't want to use message, because message actually has been corrupted as a buzzword in and of itself, right? How many times have you heard somebody say brand when they actually meant reputation? You know, or they've used some. Yeah, no, they're not the same word. You know, your brand and your reputation are not the same thing, right? Anyway, but the thing is that being able to communicate is not the same thing as being able to just regurgitate buzzwords. And so we really need to have people who actually have communication training, relationship training, understand the idea of a one-to-one conversation versus a one-to-many conversation versus a many-to-many conversation versus broadcasting, right? These are all basic fundamental concepts of communication, and modifying the actual message that you're looking to go based upon the audience that you're talking to and the venue that you're in, right? That message, audience, and medium makes a big difference in being able to get your point across.
So with the
and transcripts of this speech are available by sending $2 to my address.
So with the conversation talking about the buzzwords, and we're trying to use them to help define a complex subject topic succinctly. Quick poll of the audience here. How many of you have had to go into a director or C-level and get asked, are we doing X? Where they have no idea what that means, but they know because of their peer group, we ought to be doing it. Okay, so yeah, lots of hands going up. Yeah, so are we doing cloud? Are we doing containers? You know, you may work for a company that does nothing but shelfware. That's all the software you do. And so the answer is no, we're not doing containers because we're not developing anything, and none of our vendors are doing container-based delivery. Suddenly you're in trouble because you're not doing them. Okay, so to the buzzword piece, as analysts, you guys want to have more precision and use the words repeatably the same way. So what happens when you start having encroachment or misuse? That we've got cloud, it's been around for a long time, we've kind of figured out what that means, which means there have been a lot of growing pains. But then we get somebody coming in who claims to be disruptive, that they're doing cloud, but they're really not. Yes.
Yeah, so
I'm going to.
If I could,
I just want to say one thing. Cloud actually does have a definition from NIST, and if you go by that, everybody's happy.
All right, but private cloud. So I worked for what used to be the largest storage company that got acquired, recently, and there was a certain blogger that a lot of you knew that came up with the term. He did this big blog on private cloud. I spent 6 months arguing because it was pretty much virtualization. I was actually working on a project called Next Generation Virtual Data Center. Thank you, Calvin. Yeah, absolutely. So respect the guy. Great branding, but I think most of us would agree virtualization does not equal cloud. And we spent a lot of years kind of, fighting over that. And we're starting to get to a point now that kind of that hybrid multi-cloud, it's really one of the big themes I think we'll be hearing this week, is what does that really mean? What do I have in my own data center? is it actually cloud? Does it meet kind of the automation, have the orchestration to actually simplify the environment and make it cloud? And it's something we've been arguing as an industry, but for many years we went and was like, oh yeah, am I doing cloud? Oh yeah, I'm totally doing cloud. Tell me what you're doing. And it's like, yeah, really, are you doing cloud, or are you telling management that you're doing cloud so that they get off your back? And I understand that if that's what you're doing.
Define hybrid cloud then, because it's like, I'm sure.
Right. So are we talking about federated applications would be one thing? Is it hybrid, being that I have my own data center and I have public cloud?
It's the jump to conclusions, right? Because
yes.
I have all these different areas that I can jump to based on my set of circumstances.
Well, and there are certain applications where I'm actually pulling the applications apart, and I have certain things that are handled in the public cloud, certain things where the data lives on site. So it's absolutely hybrid cloud does not have a good definition.
But now you see why it's such a challenge in terms of creating words and definitions to things. Because if I'm a specific organization and I want to engage in a specific area, and I believe that I have a set of technologies that will actually empower a certain area, I want to tag my technology to that, because it gives me a discussion point with my customer who wants to go down that path. And so even though it may not necessarily meet the definition of everything that sits inside that, it's still relevant in the eyes of the customer based on what they're wanting to do. So that's the challenge that we have faced with this. Is a lot of times it's like, it's not black or white, there's so much gray. And it's so nuanced. And so that's where we really get into trouble, right?
So going down that, actually, you used a really good word that actually would help in this situation. If someone came to me and say, we empower people to go to the cloud, that's different than saying we are cloud.
Right. Yeah.
If they say I'm cloud, or I have a product for the cloud, that's different than saying I'm cloud, or I'm containers, or I'm this. So you got to choose those words that actually qualifiers really importantly. And they actually make a big difference too.
Yeah, I think I've got the 2015 VMworld shirt, all applications, anywhere, one cloud. Because there's only one cloud, right? It's VMware. Okay, maybe not.
Does VMware have a cloud?
At least that makes sense. At least that made sense. I can actually identify what that means. But I have to be honest, I have no idea what it means to empower something. Not in the way that it's used in the tech industry. I have no idea what it means to disrupt something. One of the funniest things, and this is a personal grief of mine in terms of buzzwords, I do not want my storage disrupted. No. I do not want my storage to lose data. But
what about your digital enterprise?
If you empower my storage to be disrupted, you are doing it wrong. Why is this so hard to understand? Thank you. Checks in the mail.
Thank you, marketing.
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm talking about when I say that the marketing stuff it goes so far.
It gets so over the ski tip based on the reality. But that's every organization. I have a story, I have a vision, I have a message I want to tell, regardless of what the back end actually does. And that's the bigger challenge I think that most technical marketing people have, is we have people that are pure marketing, we have technical marketing engineers, then we have engineers, product management, sales, and all these people, they all have a different set of agendas, and it's very hard to get them all moving and rowing in the same direction.
Well, new technology is all things for all people, right? When VMware started as test dev, now it does pretty well. Cloud, same thing. Serverless is really high on the buzz terms these days. There's a lot of caveats out there, but there's a lot of interesting things there.
Well, I agree there's interesting things, and what I would, the thing is I'd rather you tell me what, a company tells me what they do, instead of saying we are this buzzword, or we provide this buzzword. That would be a much better approach, so that if you got me in the door saying, oh, you're in a cloud company, let me talk to you more, and you told me what you did instead of just saying I'm cloud, that would be a whole lot, that's like head and shoulders above almost everybody else out there.
Come on, we are all digital transformation.
I'm not digital.
I think the bigger challenge is that it depends on where the company is in their maturity cycle, right? If I'm a startup, it's one way to approach it. If I'm a mid-tier company that's been around for 10 years, it's different. If I'm a vastly, a dinosaur that's been around for 100 years, there's a different approach that I take. And I think that's another issue and challenge that we face. It's like, do I have to reinvent myself as an entrenched company that's making a pivot into another area? Am I a startup that's on my 6th pivot because the first 5 didn't make any traction to help me exit? If I'm a mid-tier company that's had lagging sales and lagging enablement, then do I have to make a change and adjustment to get into another space to generate revenue and get buzz around my product and company? Those are all different areas that apply into this particular space. And it's very hard to play one size fits all with all of them.
And I think that you just underscored where you actually just put it brilliantly why I have a problem with buzzwords. Because it removes the context.
It does.
So the context that you're talking about is absolutely critical for being able to understand what the vector is for people to where they are and where they're going and how fast and how far. But what buzzwords do is they remove that context out of it and make it harder to determine, and that's why I have an issue with it.
Right, but we need the buzzwords to bring people to the table, and then we can go beyond the buzzwords.
Sounds like a catch-22, doesn't it? It's like...
Rosebud. Rosebud.
Gotta laugh. So people come to me, and they give me their pitch, and I'm listening to it, and I'm going, okay, that's not what you mean, because I've done my research. So half the time when people talk to me, I want them to know who I am and know my audience, to know their audience. I mean, you don't go into a marketing call without knowing who the CEO is and what their background is. If you do, you're going to be in trouble. You can't go to everybody. I mean, you can't go to a VMworld and know everybody's background, but you can assume they have a background in virtualization, whatever you define that to be. But if you're going to an analyst, do your homework, please. That's what I want from the vendors. If you're going to be talking to somebody about a possible M&A, do your homework. I mean, this is not rocket science here, but you have to do that. Most people just say, oh, I'm this, that's our homework. Marketing told me to say this. It's like, no. You know my background, tell me what it is.
So I think we're getting to the point now where we're starting to go over the same territory on a couple of occasions. So I've seen a lot of heads nodding in the audience. Anybody had a question or a comment, or in my data center we use this buzzword kind of thing? I have to say there's one thing, really kind of a funny note. Never in my entire life of being on a panel or doing a presentation have I ever seen every single person in the audience on their phone at exactly the same time. And that happened about 15 minutes ago, and I was just like, wow.
They were looking up the definition of hybrid cloud.
I'm hoping that there's a tweet going on. Come on.
I'll make a little comment from the security side. Is that what I've noticed is that I'm responsible for doing security assessments, whether it's cloud or SaaS or whatever else. And so a lot of times what I'm seeing is that we'll have other people in the company come up to us. They're like, well, it's not cloud because so you don't have to do this security analysis, Jody. We're just doing a SaaS. And I'm like, it's the same thing. It's not under our control. It's not under our direct control. Well, we're doing this and we're not doing this. Or same thing with single sign-on. In the security world, single sign-on means different things to different people. For most people, it's just, can I sign on? Other people means, can I provision? So I think it's just, even outside of virtualization, it's a big problem getting everybody on the same page with the same terminology.
That's very disruptive of you.
It's very confusing for those of us that cross those boundaries as well, because we have to know all those different terms and what they really mean to all those different people. In the security world and virtualization and cloud world is just a mess with terms.
But you also have to fight the ignorance of people who don't work in your space, right? So when the CFO comes to you for a specific question, or the director of HR, or the guy who runs prod ops, or whatever it is, right? They all have a vision of something that's in their mind. The reality is they don't work on it with a day-to-day basis. So we have to really dumb a lot of things down for them. And by the way, it's an ongoing education effort that I don't think we'll ever stop doing. It's one of the reasons we're employed.
Yeah, I think it's a little related. I remember when containers first got really excited, I was at Intel Developer Forum. A friend of ours, Nick Weaver, gave a presentation. He's like, containers are going to fix everything, and it's going to be wonderful, everything out there. And I get up there, I'm like, hey, Nick, we just spent a decade fixing like network and storage problems. Do you think we're going to have some of these? And he's like, that's a really good point. We're probably going to, spend a while doing this. And, we see this all the time as the new thing comes out, and it's like, great, simple, easy.
It's the circle of life.
Yeah, it's a circle of life. Absolutely.
I could only give one recommendation, is that if you have a buzzword that you want to use and you know that everybody in the world is attacking it on social media, don't use it. It's my advice.
Well, I think it's kind of funny because you're talking about Nick and the people like him. They're on another plane, right? And I think in all the times I've ever seen Nick, I don't think he's ever used a buzzword that I've seen. He's actually been able to clearly identify what it is that he's doing without using a buzzword. So it is possible. Yeah. And I don't think you need to have somebody of the the stature of a Nick Weaver to be able to do that. In fact, maybe we should all just go to his sessions and just start taking notes.
Is this the Nick Weaver love hour?
Well, I do have a little bit of a boy crush on Nick Weaver. I have to admit, he's kind of an awesome dude. Was that too much information? I'm sorry.
We already knew.
Well, I did put it on Twitter.
That's your tagline on LinkedIn?
No, but it was on Facebook before I deleted the account. Yeah, Nick Weaver fanboy. But there are a lot of really smart people who are able to clearly communicate what they do without having to resort to buzzwords and still get to open the door open.
Like I said, it's being able to explain what I do to my children or my grandmother. A lot of it is that it's like try to explain the internet to your grandmother. Try to explain hybrid cloud to your grandmother, right? And those types of things. Because it's like when you can do that and not sound like a douche. That means you've actually solved the problem in terms of the definitions and stuff. I made it simple enough so that most people can look at it and go, oh yeah, that's what that means. Because when they look at the world of the iPhone or the world of smartphones and the technology they use on a day-to-day basis, the simpler the better. But also if it's a matter of making a very complex technical concept simplified to the point where you've abstracted away the complexity and made it to the point where they can actually understand it, even if they did not know the underlying complexity of the technology.
Well, when I used to teach, and I would do this with my students, I would go through an exercise of having them try to explain what they wanted to do. Now, in their case, it was a paper or a project or something along those lines, and just use 7 words. Explain to me clearly what you're doing in 7 words. Before Twitter, no less. Yeah. And the idea was basically you need to work on understanding what it is that you do so that you can clearly explain it. In that Einstein quote, right? If you can't explain it simply enough, then you don't understand it yourself.
It's one of the reasons I always have people that I work with when I'm designing or when I'm working around a product that we're going to pitch and produce. It's like you need to be able to explain it in a sentence, in 5 minutes, in 30 minutes, in an hour. Pick one of those, and then you can go into the requisite depth that you need to go into for each one of those based on the audience that you're discussing with. And that's when you can really kind of dive down deep below the definition that's publicly common knowledge and meet it more towards the needs of what they're looking for in terms of an outcome.
As Mark Twain said, if I had more time, I'd make it shorter. So grammar matters, but the devil's in the details. So the audience is starting to throw things over proper use of words and everything like that. How many in here cringe every time they see a capital W in VMworld or VMware? It still makes me twitch.
Here's the thing: there's a lot in a name. Get it right. Seriously.
Because we're pedantic, right, Ed?
Exactly. No, here's the thing: is that you're right. Whether you use on-prem, premises, just use them properly.
I think I just got hives.
At your house.
Let me explain why it makes a difference to me, and because I think depending upon which context you're talking about, you have a very good point. But the reason why I have a really hard time with it is the same reason why I have a hard time when someone spells NVMe over fabrics incorrectly. What it means to me is that somebody is trying to con me into thinking that they are talking about something that I'm too dumb to understand, right? It's a used car salesman thing that I have a hard time with. On-prem drives me absolutely nuts. On-premise drives me nuts because of the fact that that means that they're telling me they don't care that they're inaccurate, and they don't care that I am either too stupid to be aware, right? Because then it won't matter one way or the other, or that I should just sort of ignore the fact that they're too stupid to know the difference. The thing is that the precision in language does have a benchmark where when you cross, you fail. And if what you're trying to do is you're trying to tell me that I don't know that you don't know that you're not doing NVMe over fabrics. You're using a different acronym that is what's standardized, and therefore you're trying to con me into thinking that you have a standardized approach to a technology when you don't. And that makes a huge difference to me, because that means that you're not just lying to me, you're lying to your customers. You're lying to the people who are investing in you. You're lying into the people that are doing that.
It's okay, Jack.
No, it's not okay. It's not okay!
Okay, so
It's not okay!
we've got about 5 minutes, and what I wanted to wrap up with was just what Jay did. I wanted to hear from the panelists what your current biggest pet peeve is with the use or misuse of language, and we clearly have yours for now. For now, because I'm sure that over time...
I'm a very calm individual.
So let's work our way down and hear the pet peeve that you have, the use or misuse of language right now. Well, not right now, but currently.
So I'm not letting it get to me anymore, but it is the hybrid and multi-cloud piece there, because usually when they're saying it and then you ask them for kind of to explain what it is, they really don't understand it. So, you know, I'm excited when I talk to most users. They are putting together cloud strategies, but most of them are still, as I say, the ink is still drying. That's yes. I'm trying not to let the little tiny things get the analness that I and most of the panelists, I think all the panelists have.
I'm actually a little bit with Jay on this one, and a little bit with Stu on this one, is that what the words you use are actually very important, because if you don't take the time to, well, not you, everybody in the audience, but the vendors don't take the time to do the right thing and use the right language, it basically means they don't really want me as a customer. They don't care about me. They don't care about language. They don't care about me, because I care about language. Literally. Yes. So when you start thinking about it, we all give marketing a grain of salt. That's fine. But when I see deep down technical documentation that's wrong, that bothers me a lot. Because that means someone who wrote that, who was technical, doesn't care about their customers. And that means that their support's going to suffer, and it's like, why would I want to buy this? Because it's actually telling me that they just don't care. And that's my problem with this, but I'm trying to recover from it. But you're right, when it comes to the marketing stuff, we all give them a grain of salt. We have to, because otherwise we just would never get through it. And whether a person uses on-prem, those terms, it makes no difference to me. But I do caution anybody that comes to me and says, well, what about this, and you start using those terms incorrectly, I say, hey, can you just say on-site, because that's really what you mean. Or say, I'm going to be in the cloud or on-site in your data center. You really don't want to get into these things on social media, because it's just bad for your business. So think about it from that perspective. If you get into a language fight with somebody, that's just going to be bad for your business.
My current beef is serverless. It's possibly the worst term ever. And everyone involved in the serverless ecosystem should hang their head in shame.
Where's shame now? Is that somewhere in the cloud?
But my other one, in serverless, is like, I mean, I think everybody involved in that space wants a better definition, but that's the one that they've glommed onto right now. Until somebody comes with a better one and pays me for my definition, we'll go that way. The other one is hybrid cloud intercloud, and multi-cloud, which are all kind of the same thing, but they're all kind of not the same thing. That's another one that just like sticks in my craw because it means so many different things to so many different people, and so many organizations glom on to, we have a hybrid cloud strategy to address your specific X, but it's not really hybrid cloud. It's only 1/8 or 1/20th or 1/4 of the whole totality of a solution, and therefore it really isn't any of those things. It's just a piece of the puzzle.
It's the hybrid multi-cloud.
The inter multi hybrid cloud, hybrid multi inter fabric, on premises
As a service.
I'm going to inject Cobra Commander into all of my
Say
discussions.
as a service one more time.
Ass, Cas, pass. No one computes for free. Ultimately, it is serverless.
And the other thing is that when we start talking about all this and about multi-cloud and all that, yeah, it's kind of painful. The thing is that when your buzzword becomes a drinking game, you probably should stop using it.
Have you seen?
That is probably the best roundup to this session, is when your buzzword becomes part of the drinking game.
And they're all drinking. This entire panel has been a drinking game. I am way too sober for this. I've been having club soda.
So with that, gentlemen, thank you for joining us for our third and final session. Give love to our sponsors down on the panel next to Jay. They are the ones who really need thanks for providing this venue, the activities later tonight. So thank you. We've got 3 hours for the party. Go to the opening expo, say hi to these sponsors and everybody else, and hope to see a bunch of you back here in a few hours.